In 1929, when O'Keeffe spent the first of many summers painting in and around Taos, New Mexico, she learned to drive and purchased a car. In the early 1930s, when she was in New Mexico, she began exploring areas southwest of Taos and discovered a large, ruined adobe hacienda perched on the top of a cliff in the village of Abiquiu. Although the harsh, snowy New Mexico winters and its often intense and violent summer rains had nearly washed the adobe mud brick walls of the house away, O'Keeffe knew she wanted the 3-acre property. It offered a spectacular view of the Chama River Valley below that O'Keeffe loved. As she pointed out,
the view from the house across a wide green valley toward a low mountain is very fine. The tree series I did from my window in Abiquiu, looking down into the valley.
This view ultimately inspired some of O'Keeffe's paintings of the valley's cottonwood trees and the one standing wall of its patio, whose flatness was punctuated by a large wooden door, fascinated O'Keeffe.
I bought the place because it had that door in the patio, the one I've painted so often. I had no peace until I bought the house. They didn't want to sell. It was given to the church, and I was 10 years getting it. Those little squares in the door paintings are tiles in front of the door. They're really there, so you see the painting is not abstract. It's quite realistic.
Moreover, the property had an enormous garden, which could satisfy one of O'Keeffe's ongoing desires to grow her own fruits and vegetables.
I was living and painting at Ghost Ranch, an area of painted desert northwest of Abiquiu, but I kept returning to Abiquiu to look around. The garden pleased me enormously.
And most important, the property had water rights, which the local community had kept active over the years by using the water regularly to irrigate the gardens they had planted on the property. Because the house was owned by the Catholic Church when O'Keeffe first saw it, and although O'Keeffe knew she wanted it, there seemed little hope of a purchase. Late in the summer of 1934, O'Keeffe discovered Ghost Ranch, whose dramatic hills and cliffs of reds, yellows, greens, pinks, and purples immediately appealed to O'Keeffe. The Ghost Ranch was owned by Arthur Pack, who ran it as a dude ranch. When O'Keeffe returned to New Mexico in 1935, she lived in one of the houses in its main compound. In 1936, she returned to Ghost Ranch and rented a small adobe house 3 miles from the compound, surrounded by the desert forms she had come to love, and she purchased it from Pack in 1940. It was surrounded by the exotic landscape forms of a natural world for which O'Keeffe had a profound appreciation and felt a particular affinity.
Badlands roll away from my door, hill after hill. Red hills of apparently the same sort of earth that you mix with oil to make paint. All the earth colors of the painter's palette are out there in the many miles of Badlands. The light Naples yellow through the ochres, orange and red and purple earth, even the soft earth greens. Our wasteland, I think our most beautiful country.
These elemental, compelling forms surrounded her Ghost Ranch house.
At the back door are the red hills and the cliffs and the sands, the Badlands. I go out of my back door and walk for 15 minutes, and I am someplace that I've never been before, where it seems that no one has ever been before me.
And to the south looms the Pedernal, a flat-top mountain with which O'Keeffe identified. As she pointed out,
if she painted it often enough, God would give it to her.
The same year she purchased the house, she met a young woman from Texas who was in New Mexico trying to make her way as a writer, Maria Chabot, and O'Keeffe invited her to live with her at the Ghost Ranch. They spent the next 4 summers there, during which Chabot and O'Keeffe often made camping painting trips to what O'Keeffe called the White Place, across from Abiquiu, and the Black Place, an area of the Beastie Badlands about 150 miles west of the Ghost Ranch. During this time, O'Keeffe and Chabot often visited Abiquiu in hopes of buying a property there in order to have a garden because they had discovered it was impossible to be successful with one in the arid, clay-like desert land that surrounded the Ghost Ranch. Although she and Chabot looked at many properties in Abiquiu, O'Keeffe never gave up hope of being able to acquire the hacienda she had come to love. In 1945, after a nearly 15-year campaign, she succeeded in persuading the church to sell it to her. She contacted Chabot, with whom she had had a falling out, and asked her to oversee the restoration of it. Chabot agreed and completed the project in 1949, the year O'Keeffe moved from New York to make New Mexico her permanent home 3 years after the death of her husband, Alfred Stieglitz.
When I bought it, it was totally uninhabitable. Architecturally, it is not a masterpiece, but a house that grew. Only what I need is in it. I like walls empty. I've only left up 2 Arthur doves, some African sculpture, and a little of my own stuff.
Today, both houses are owned by the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, which has kept them very much like they were at the time of O'Keeffe's death in 1986. Both reveal the less is more aesthetic of modernism by which she lived, and their simple, large glass windows fill their interior spaces with light and, in turn, provide expansive views of the natural world, thus creating a dynamic relationship between the inside and outside worlds. Although internationally recognized for her broad range of work spanning many decades, it is O'Keeffe's depictions of the land in this strikingly beautiful state of New Mexico that have led to its being known today as O'Keeffe Country.